This is the Syrn Media Grant Info session, today featuring the Gotham Film and Media Institute. Thank you for tuning in. We will begin soon. Zach, Kia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Very nice to see you, Liz.
Yeah, I really appreciate your taking the time. So you guys have gone through a lot of changes and I'm really excited to talk with you about it. But if you wouldn't mind first just introducing yourselves and your roles at Gotham.
Sure, I can start. So my name's Kia Brooks and I am Deputy Director of the Gotham. So that means I oversee all of our membership, programming, and marketing. And I've been with the organization for about 6 years. I used to oversee our media center physical location and all of our events that we had both internally and externally, as well as worked on Gotham Week, formerly IFP Week, doing special events at first, and then last year also working on our conference. And previous to that, I was a film publicist.
Amazing. Zach?
I'm Zach Mandinach. I'm the Director of Narrative Programming at the Gotham, primarily overseeing artist support opportunities for US-based fiction feature filmmakers. And I have been here for 6.5 years. And before that was working in festival programming at certain festivals around New York. And that's me.
Great. Kia, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the Gotham's history and really the mission to support the media community in New York and provide direct project support, especially since you've been there for a little while? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the Gotham Film and Media Institute, formerly IFP, which stands for Independent Filmmaker Project, was started in 1979 and really as a way to showcase finished films that were kind of growing in the American market. That showcase then evolved into a fully fledged organization where we ended up having, educational opportunities. It grew into a membership, and then eventually in the 90s, it also grew into a marketplace, which is now called IFP, Gotham Week, formerly IFP Week. We just rebranded in January, so we're all still getting used to the name change. But yeah, so it grew into a market that really kind of also coincided with this big boom in independent film in the 90s. And from there, the organization, as I said, really kind of took into the account of really focusing in on filmmakers' career sustainability. And through that, we do, our year-round membership initiatives. So we're hosting workshops, conversations around a variety of topics that are really essential to ensuring that filmmakers, are continuing to grow their careers. And then also in the past couple of years, our mission has evolved to not only support filmmakers, but really seeing that filmmakers are not just doing one thing nowadays, and that the formats and everything that kind of relates to media and arts is really merging, and there's a little bit of a blurred lines in that respect. So now we also support audio creators as well. All of this, in addition to the membership related programming, is that we host labs which Zach could obviously speak about. We have a fiction lab, a nonfiction documentary lab, and a TV series lab, with the hopes that, audio will also kind of fall into that bucket eventually. And then just to kind of reiterate, we also have Gotham Week, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then we also have a few other programs specifically related to different communities. One is our program Owning It, which started in April 2018, so it's almost 3 years old, and that's for women and non-binary creators and entrepreneurs, and again with that same mission to really support the growth and empower them through their careers. And then a newer initiative that formed out of Gotham Week in 2020 called Expanding Communities, which is all about supporting Black, Indigenous, people of color creators, again, through similar initiatives. And then a more recent program that we have is called Gotham EDU, which also supports creators, but at an even earlier stage as students. So that's a program where we work with colleges and universities. So all that's to say is we really try to support creators at all different stages of their development, and really to, again, see us as a space where you can grow your network through industry relationships, through potential community building, through our other members, as well as to really provide educational resources to grow your skill set.
I mean, that is quite the wide slate of really programs to empower filmmakers. Can you tell us a little bit specifically though about Gotham Week conference and kind of the public facing aspects of that?
For sure. So the conference is, as you just said, the public facing aspect. So, obviously 2020 was very different than past years, but really mostly in respect of just being in a virtual setting. We still had the same goals and mission, which was to provide content to filmmakers and honestly to lovers of film as well, to get a sense of, what projects are new this year that can kind of talk about their experience and ways that they could then people that are attending events could apply whatever these filmmakers or creators have learned about going through the process of working on a particular project to their own projects and careers. That's really kind of the mandate across the board. But we do that through a variety of avenues. One is panels and conversations that we host. So again, they could be around a particular film or project, or even with a particular filmmaker or creator. And then we also host workshops through an initiative called Direct Access, which is really an opportunity to kind of have a smaller, more intimate session with, for example, in the fall, we did one with Ted Hope talking about his experience in the industry. We did one with the DPA talking about the waterfall guidelines. And then we also took our TV lab and kind of did like a mini intensive version of that. So just to get a sense, like those are really more about getting that kind of like hands-on direct access, it's even in the name, to the industry and to understand, how you can apply things to your own careers. And then we also do networking events. So again, I'm speaking about the 2020 version because it's the most recent and the most similar to what 2021 will be. We did some virtual networking opportunities as well, where we partnered with different organizations such as New York Women in Film and Television, Black TV and Film Collective, and Ghetto Film School, where we gave opportunities for our members to actually network in a virtual setting with other organizations. And that's something too we try to do year round, but we did do that at the conference this year.
That's great. Always good to get those groups together who can benefit from each other. Zach, would you mind talking a little bit about the project market and what happens there?
Sure, happy to. So the project market is, by comparison, the kind of more closed doors aspect of the Gotham Week, but it's still, there's still a lot of goings on in the project market, and it's very wide in its scope, but it's basically a marketplace, a meetings forum for in-progress works from independent artists. And that began kind of, as Kia was talking about in terms of the organization, began very specifically about independent film. And even in decades past, we supported short films, but now where it stands is there's a wide range in feature film, both fiction and nonfiction, but a series as well makes up a decent portion of the number of projects we support each year, which tends to be about 140, 150 projects. So we support both TV series and audio series as well. And we're basically selecting these projects and then setting them up with meetings based on the interest of the attending industry to help move their projects and their careers by extension forward. That's the core goal of the market. And basically what happens in it is thousands of meetings, literally. And Liz, you would be able to attest to this. We, last year, for the first time ever, just like the conference, we took the market virtual and did it over Zoom. And we set up around 2,500 meetings in the market over the course of about 4 or 5 days. Very much about expanding the contacts, the Rolodex of these creators. That's basically what happens.
It is quite the project to behold, you guys doing this work. It's great. What is the ideal career stage or project stage even for an applicant who might be interested in applying to the project market? And I know you mentioned that you're taking feature films, you're taking TV or episodic, you're also taking audio projects. So if there is any variance there as well, would love to know.
There's probably a range, like speaking from my perspective. So we accept around 150 projects in total, give or take, for the market each year. And I specifically oversee a subset of that 150 that comprises around 20 to 25 fiction feature films. Those projects, I would say primarily, and even just the submissions we get for that specific subsection, primarily come from emerging writer-directors the producers' experience can range. Sometimes they're emerging producers, sometimes they're more experienced. The reality is, I think it tends to benefit more the emerging-ish writer directors, whereas there are people like Chloe Zhao, for instance, who like we were lucky enough and fortunate enough to support, but I would probably guess that Chloe is probably not coming back to the market anytime soon. So there are writer directors who kind of age out of it almost in terms of their experience, where they probably have their own connections and networks that they can utilize for their projects. So that tends to be on the fiction feature side. On the documentary side, it's probably more wide ranging on both fronts, both the writer directors and the producers, because I think there's just more of an infrastructure for meetings forums for documentaries across all levels of experience, both emerging and experienced. And the series and audio, because they're relatively new, I think we've considered and supported a wide range of projects, be it where the projects were at and where the creators behind them were at in terms of their careers. But what we really try to do, just by sheer numbers, but also within the big number of 150, which by comparison is quite large for US-based events like it, we're trying to come up with an array of projects of types where they're at in their project, be it early development through post-production, and presenting the industry professionals that attend a wide array so that we're not just we're presenting 150 of the same type of project, so that they have choices basically when they're browsing through them.
That makes sense. And actually on the industry side, who are the people who are attending these events and taking meetings with projects during Gotham Week?
The industry side, I would say, is probably as equally varied as the projects we support. There are independent producers, one person operations looking for new work, just trying a producer who's maybe produced a film or two and is looking to find new work or be connected with new creators. And then there's full-fledged production companies, financiers, distributors, talent agents, sales agents, distributors meaning not just traditional theatrical distributors, but now, streaming platforms and even audio platforms as well for the audio projects, festival programmers. So it's a wide range of types on the industry side that come in to take meetings, and a lot of them are looking for different types of projects perhaps, but I think all of them are looking to be connected to interesting, exciting work and interesting, exciting artists in a way that maybe they'll be able to, get a first look at something that nobody else has heard about or nobody else has really seen. So I would say it's just as varied on the industry side as it is on the project side.
And what's the deadline to apply this year?
The deadlines to apply, so if you're a fiction feature filmmaker and you're applying with a fiction feature film, the final deadline is April 6th. We have early and final deadlines, and the main difference is there's just a discount in the submission fee. For documentaries, the early deadline will be April 26th, and the final deadline is May 11th. For TV series, the early deadline will be May 6th, and the final deadline will be May 17th. And for audio projects, the early deadline will be May 11th, and the final deadline May 25th. So all of it coming up within the next couple months, really.
So as someone who has applied and gotten in and gotten rejected, both, are there common faux pas or mistakes that you see when people are applying that you'd say, hey, this is something that you should avoid doing? And the other side of that, this is something you should focus on doing?
That's a good question. One thing, none of these things are necessarily make or break, because we're taking into account a lot of different factors when we're looking at these projects, not just the material, be it the script, or for documentaries, the trailer or sizzle reel. One thing that I think I try to stress to the filmmakers that I talk to as they're thinking about or planning on applying is, because of what the event is, I think they feel like they have to explicate in their application kind of how their project fits within the marketplace, because it's such a marketplace type event where it's literally just the industry and artists connecting. And that's not necessarily something that we emphasize when we're evaluating the projects, because if anything, I feel like my responsibility and the responsibility of the rest of the programming team and the market itself is to kind of lean into projects that might not necessarily feel like they're an easy fit for the marketplace. We're kind of trying to support projects that hopefully push the attending industry members a little bit out of their comfort zone, a little bit out of their box, so that we're not necessarily just presenting them with projects on a silver platter that are like perfect, you know, pitch perfect, scripts in perfect shape, everything. So that's something that I think the applying artists tend to think that they need to focus on, but they don't. And if anything, the thing that they should focus on, the thing that I always try to emphasize is make sure on top of, you know, your script or whatever it may be being, you know, in a good place, make sure to emphasize your artistic vision, as generic as that may sound. I think I certainly, but I think my colleagues as well, tend to be more excited by, yes, the project at hand, but also the vision behind it and what the artist sees as important about the story they're trying to tell and urgent and timely. And so that, as generic as that may sound, is my advice to interested artists in applying, is to not necessarily focus so much of their trying to jam their project into a box that the industry would understand, thinking that that's what interests us. It's more about the creative vision behind the project.
Thank you. And conversely, Kia, I'm thinking about the conference now. You know, who are the industry people who are attending the conference, and is there a certain career stage for those who would be wanting to come to the conference?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of those, industry participating in the conference, it's definitely, people typically at a certain level in their career that are on the panels, just because we see that as an opportunity for them to kind of talk about the great things that they've experienced, but also the not so great things, to really give the attendees an opportunity to, again, see how it can be applicable to their own projects or careers. But what's great is we have a good number of attending industry that are there for the project market also attend our actual panels as well. Yeah.
Are there any examples you can think of events that kind of best represent the goals of the conference? Like this set of programming was really like in line with the conference.
Yeah, so I mean, last year, and generally how it's done is, it's usually last year it was over 6 days. And so Sunday is when the conference typically begins. And we kind of use that as more of like a catch-all day where it's generally kind of talking about the state of the industry at that time. So obviously last year we were in, somewhat of a precarious situation with the pandemic. And we really wanted to focus on, the positives that were coming out of certain aspects of sort of having this new life that we were all living, whether it be looking at different formats people were using to tell their stories. So for example, the first event of the day was called Blurring the Lines of Storytelling. How do I get my story out? And that was a conversation with a few different filmmakers, Don Porter, as well as Garrett Bradley, and a few others talking about their experience, telling stories. One, also beyond the pandemic, obviously we're going through a point of social justice change as well. So talking about how, they want to tell these very powerful stories and what determines what format, or is it a short film versus a feature film? So we felt that really spoke to the overall goals of the conference. So that's just one example. But then we tried to, at least last year, the format was that Monday was our sort of fiction day. So then we covered topics, for example, of like how, as a Black filmmaker, do you think about reaching audiences? Because, everyone thinks that Black filmmakers think about audiences in a different way, although that's not necessarily the case. But just talking about their experience as well. So we had Haria Muhammad, as well as a few others talking about their experience too. And then on Tuesday, that was our doc day. So again, looking at social change, we had a conversation around how do you think about change making in your projects from a documentary standpoint? So we had the filmmakers of Crip Camp, the filmmakers of Boys State, talking about that. And then on, I guess, the days, it must have been Wednesday, was our TV series day. And on that day, you know, again, we focused on specific projects. We did a conversation with the team behind Betty, for example, but then we also really, to tie in with the whole thinking about your career, we did a conversation called Women Owning the Writer's Room, where we had a few different female, you know, writer's room showrunners talking about what their experience has been like coming up in the TV industry. And that was one of our most popular events. And then we also used Thursday and Friday to introduce audio into the week. So we had conversations with Audible and Spotify and other audio related companies talking about a variety of topics. But going into 2021, we really want to integrate all of the programming in a different way. So you'll see now audio throughout the week. You'll see those programs like Owning It and Expanding Communities having space throughout the week, so that our audience really sees it as one cohesive vision. And again, all focusing on that sort of how do we actually help support your projects or careers.
Really exciting stuff on both sides. Okay, so where can we go if we're interested in attending the conference?
So right now, there's you could go to the Gotham.org site to just kind of get a sense of the dates. The conference usually doesn't actually start being promoted till August, so there's a bit of time, but also your team can, of course, connect people to me directly as well.
Awesome, and we will be sure to put the website in this. And Zach, where can people go if they are interested in the project market?
The same place, the Gotham.org. And once you're there, if you see on the top of our website, there's apply, and you'll see Gotham Week there. And you can find information applying for whichever section of the project market you're interested in, be it fiction features, documentaries, TV series, audio. All the information is there. But of course, feel free to share my email with anyone interested as well.
Yeah, and you know, Zach, you mentioned Chloe Zhao very quickly there, but can you speak to some of the success stories from the project market and, you know, films or projects in general that have really excelled through making their industry connections during Gotham Week?
Yes, there are many of them, and I was trying to think or narrow them down in my head. One that it's helpful, we can kind of look back to see who met with who at certain IFP weeks, as it was known in the past. One, which was one of my first years, if not my first year as full-time staff, we supported The Last Black Man in San Francisco, Joe Talbot directed, and he was there in the market with his producer, Kalia Neal, when it was just an early stage script, and they had actually, at that point, I think they had had a successful Kickstarter campaign. So there was kind of like that level of buzz. This was when, you know, crowdfunding was really taking off. This was 2015 maybe. And that year they met with two people that I think were fairly instrumental in kind of the overall life of that project. One was Leah Giblin from Cinereach, which was very crucial in the making and eventual, you know, release of that film. And Tamir Muhammad, who at the time was working for Time Warner 150, which was an incubator program at Time Warner Foundation for just creative artists. Through that, through 150, Joe was able to make a short film, which wasn't necessarily related to the feature film, Last Black Man in San Francisco, but stylistically it was similar. That film went to Sundance. Joe eventually went through the Sundance Lab. Cinereach, you know, came on board the film, and the film, of course, then eventually at a certain point became produced by A24 and Plan B and all of this stuff. And so we were very, you know, a small part of the village that it took to make that film. But I think because of those connections, the ball kind of started getting rolling in a certain way. A certain momentum kind of took off from that. And there are countless stories very similar to that. But that's one I know that we were fairly early supporters on, that allowed for certain connections to grow over the course of 5 years, I think, between the time they were at the market and when that film eventually premiered.
I'm so glad you gave the timeline on that. I think it's very easy for people to think that these films get made very quickly, or, you know, a series or whatever, but being able to value that first yes, that early stage yes, and the amount of time and effort that it takes in between the first one before it gets out there is just something that's really valuable. And I'm glad that you pointed out. Kia, Zach, thank you guys both so much for joining us today for this grant info session. We really appreciate the work that the Gotham is doing, and we really look forward to speaking with you guys more and learning more about the opportunities.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's always great to chat with you.
Me too. Me too. Thanks.